Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Practical Pet Business with Lorin and Rob and myself, Robert Semrau. We know you've got a lot on your plate, and taking any time with us is certainly something that we appreciate. So, welcome. We're going to hit on a topic today, Lorin, that again, we've kind of gotten several different areas thrown out to us. I'm going to try and bring it together into one topic. But before I do that, I want to make sure that all of you out there know you can send us your thoughts, your ideas, things you want Lorin and I to touch on by sending us an email to practicalpetchat@gmail.com. And we'll be happy to, Lorin will be happy to look at that and tell me what to do. So, Lorin, the one we've got today was kind of a multi-part question, but um, the importance of store staffs understanding the products on a deeper level, things like nutrition, things like health, supplements, behavior, to be able to help customers to find the right products. And the secondary part of that is also to be a source as stores are continually challenged with things that are being back ordered more often than not these days. And these delays cause frustration not just to the store but to the customer. So having that deeper rapport and that deeper VOI that you and I have talked about over time really can be critical to the success, especially of those independent retailers.
Yeah, so I think what we're talking about is what to stock and how much of it to stock and what to do when we fall short. So, um, I look at a lot of pet stores because that's my happy place. So I just go in and wander around and take a look at the aisles and how they merchandise, and I'm a fan of merchandising, good merchandising. Um, and it's interesting how some people stock, or I should say, don't stock their stores. Um, I overstocked. I had a lot of stock and a lot of different products, but my turnover was relative to that. I mean, we turned over a lot of product, and I thought I was minimizing my need to order as often. And in fact, I ended up, the last year or so before I sold my store, just having to place constant orders all the time. And still, I was like, how is this even possible? I'm overstocked. The bigger issue, I think, is the understocking because you can't make a sale if you don't have something. So that's number one. Number two, you can tell when a store is hurting financially
Yeah.
because they have one or two of like small 5-pound bags of food. They have one or two across the entire display. So they don't have a lot of turnover. The dates are in question because you want to take a look at how long they've been on the shelf. Hopefully the product is clean and dusted on the regular, or they're tight on funds. Maybe they're looking at not in this for the long term. But there's sort of a rule of thumb that you have at least three of the small bags of food, and you have at least one to two of the next couple of sizes. And there are ways to merchandise that to stripe it and those sorts of things to make it look like more. But understocking is an issue because we are constantly facing times of not being able to get product. Brands are suffering as well. They're making changes. They're going more places. I see on the daily somebody somewhere in some group all the time complaining about this brand is now going direct. And, this brand is going into this platform over here because they're trying to maintain as well. They're trying to make sales and they're trying to keep their business together. And retailers get angry about it because all brands are built on the back of retailers, independent retailers for the most part. So noses get out of joint. And I understand that. But it's a quid pro quo kind of thing. We have to provide the support they have to provide the support, and we need the consumer to make the purchases. So there's a lot of moving pieces in this. And making sure that you have adequate, clean, rotated, faced stock that is current in its packaging, current in its dating, with a longevity to the dating is critical. And if you want to minimize how much you carry of something, then minimize how much space you're taking up. So it doesn't look like you have very little. You have to be creative with all of that. The other thing too is if you get notification that there's going to be shortages, put up a sign so that the customer knows and say, listen, we expect, pandemic was a perfect example. We expect shortages, right? Even when we didn't know there were going to be shortages, people were buying all the toilet paper they could find. So you want to put out, hey, this brand has let me know that there may be shortages coming up here soon for tariff reasons, for shipping reasons, for, whatever, but put the sign out. And you might want to order up if you have that option,
Yeah,
because the natural instinct of people, like with toilet paper, is to grab extra to be sure
right.
they have
Lauren,
enough.
let me ask you this. Let me jump in here for a second. When do you do that? Do you do it quickly? Do you do it after a week? Like, what was your approach? Because I know my approach is the minute I know, I want to be transparent with my folks. But that wasn't something that I had people coming in every single day.
Yeah.
Um,
So the minute I know, balanced with how much product I have,
yeah,
and based upon the conversation that I either just had or am about to have with distribution, where I'm like, what do you got in stock? And can
yeah,
I already place an order? Because the orders were filled as, they came in kind of thing. Because I needed to plan ahead. I needed to know if once I put this sign up, I already know what's going to happen. So I wanted to be sure I had enough. Um, it has worked very well. I mean, once the pandemic hit, I ordered way up, because I didn't know what to expect. And turnover was good anyway. And there was a little bit of concern on my part because things were still in the flux of, we're going to be open, we're not going to be open. Nobody knew what was essential and what wasn't. At that time, I still ordered up because I couldn't think of anything worse than not being able to get people what they needed. I mean, if I had
sure.
to, I'd start delivering, whatever I needed to do to be sure that animals got what they needed. But it that comes down to accessible funds though, right? Because a lot of people can't do that. You want to order up and you might order up maybe 10% of what you normally do, which is could be a lot depending on what that number you normally do is. I would order, depending on the brand, anywhere from 20 to 50% more, and try to do that a couple of times until I knew we were over the hump. With the tariffs, how do we predict that? We just don't know. We don't know. Tariffs are on again, off again, on again, off again. And I think I saw something the other day that last chance to buy before tariffs go into place. And I looked to see what the product was and where it came from. And I'm like, it doesn't even apply to you.
Right. Right. Well, and here's the reality of that is because I have said that to a couple of people, like it's the fact that I've got to ship and the shipping part is being stressed as well. And so I'm like, okay, gotcha, but that's I'm not going to pay for that. So the thing about it too is if you're a vendor and you're listening to this, hopefully you're taking away. You got to let them know right away. You got to let your stores know because I found that you can have these conversations if there is some time between the expected delays and the notification. But if you just let them know, like, hey, sorry, we're back ordered, you're more often than not burning a bridge.
Yes.
And, the stores have to pivot. You can't have empty shelves. How often, I mean, I still walk into different grocery stores sometimes and I'll see an empty shelf and I'll be like, whoa, did I miss an update here? Like, are we back in, pandemic times? What's going on?
Hmm.
Now, if I go back in the evening, they've probably restocked it and it's filled up again. But just seeing that, I think we're also conditioned now to be like, wait, is
Yes.
there a problem? Is there a problem? Because I need to get ahead of it. I've got I'm a human parent, I'm a pet parent, and I'm a husband. So I got a lot of people I feel responsible for. So I'm hypersensitive to will it be there? You know. Um, so I like that you're talking about that. The area I also want to kind of ease into this is also talking to the staff. If the staff is involved with your customers and has an idea, yes, data sometimes you can rely on that, most of the time. But there is that anecdotal of, hey, just out of curiosity, what are we hearing from our customer base? I think the pandemic was a great example of that, right? Was, you know, are people being sent home? Are they being paid? Are they being laid off? What are we hearing?
Hmm.
And as the owner of the business, you can't be in all conversations. So, building up that rapport that was part of the question that we got was the reason that's important is having the rapport gives you additional insights. It keeps that customer loyal to you. And in times like this, where we're looking at back orders or we're looking at shortfalls, or we've got an opportunity to stock up on something, I can tap into that anecdotal knowledge base that I have in the employees, and they can give me the guidance that maybe a spreadsheet isn't going to give me that day and
Right.
allow me to say, okay, here's what I'm hearing from you all. I'm seeing something. We've had a couple of, things that tell me I'm going to make that decision positive here and I'm going to pass on it over here. And I think for the most part, that's something that I think a lot of people unfortunately missed because it was so overwhelming. And I think now with the tariffs and whatever the next thing will be, because there's always something next that's going to hit us, um, you got to get your mindset right about, okay, how do I approach this? I like you said 10%. I would think that a number of you out there went 10%. That like, is that really stocking up? I know you gave the caveat of in some things that is a lot. In others, maybe not so much. But this isn't a break glass, in case of emergency moment necessarily. So it's a measured approach. And that's what we're trying to get into your mindsets today is have that approach, tap into all the different resources you have. It starts with your vendors who darn well better communicate to you properly. If something's going on, they should know. And, they've got manufacturing schedules, all the rest of that. They should have a better idea of long term what's going on. But then it's okay. Now, what are we going to do here on the local level? I've got my spreadsheets. I can see the sales records over the past couple of years. I've got my employees who talk with these people on a regular basis and they talk nutrition and they talk about the health and they talk about the importance of this or that. Hey guys, this is going to be a little different meeting. Let's bring you in. What are you hearing from customers? What's your impression? And then you have to filter that because anecdotally, remember, these people giving you that feedback are also feeling the same stresses and pressures that everybody else is, right? So you may have a little bit of extra panic being delivered to you. Oh my God, everybody is. Well, not everybody is. Maybe the pandemic, that might be one of the few times that happened. But look at it and say, okay, I'm going to make my adjustments. And then the other element of it is you ask the question, what do you have available for me? And if the answer is well, we don't have anything until we get it, what alternatives do you have? And if they don't have alternatives for you, now your next steps are I need to find alternatives to fill my customers' needs. And I've seen that work both ways, where it's been a great opportunity to bring in some new things that they were thinking about doing. And then I've seen them shut down and say, nope, we're going to save that space. And to your point, now I got open shelves. Or now I'm moving things around. And it's like you have one bag, and if I flip it around and look at the expiration date and all the rest of that, I know that bag's been sitting here for a while. So do yourself a favor. How does that store look to you? How does it look to your employees? And then if you get a couple of outside folks, what does this shelf say to you? Don't, you
Well,
know,
I think a lot of people too, when they're taking a space for a store, they don't imagine how they're going to fill that space. They look at the space and they don't think about it in terms of quantity of products and how much room they take, plus the display shelves and what they're going to carry and how they're going to lay it out and all of that sort of thing. But you mentioned the 10%. If you have 1,000 products, SKUs,
yeah,
and you need to increase on 80% of those by 10%, that's a lot of outlay of cash.
yep,
So it doesn't seem like a lot, but it really is. And let's face it, even during the pandemic when people could only come to the door, and we couldn't let them in, everything's still living, right? It still has issues, it still has needs, people are still and in the case of the pandemic, there were greater concerns because animals were picking up on the stress. And so more of them were not eating or throwing up or having, bad bathroom breaks, all that kind of stuff. So there was more of a need, more conversations that needed to take place. I I really think that, lately, for the last few months, I've been working with a wonderful nationwide independent distributor and the bird's eye view insight with the tariffs going on has been really an education because the letters that go out from the vendors to distribution channels, sometimes to consumers, are either so incredibly vague that they're just empty information. There's nothing there of any value. But they've said something. So nobody can say they didn't hear from them. Or the other ones are so specific that I appreciate that. The one thing that I remember during the pandemic, and like you said, there's always going to be something that, is another issue we have to deal with. Um, when somebody didn't have an answer for me, I didn't just go, oh, okay, well, let me know. Keep me posted. If you don't have an answer for me of when it's going to be in, okay, I'm going to go all the way through every possible contact I can to find out who can tell me that, whether that's the distributor, another retailer, another brand, the brand itself, up the chain of command in the brand. What do you foresee? What are you thinking? Now, the pandemic, it got a little clearer in parts, and in other parts, it got, whoa, crap, a little bit worse. It's kind of like the terrace, on again, off again, on again, off again. Um, and what's interesting to me is watching the reaction of vendors and how they're handling or not handling it. So my statement to vendors out there is figure out what your position is and figure out what your timing is going to be, and then put that together in an easy to understand one pager that you can put out in email form, as a statement to your distribution channels or your resellers. And, that then gives them something that they don't look like complete, I don't know, idiots to their consumers. Because really, the retailer's consumer is your consumer as a vendor or a brand or a distributor, right? So
right,
what we all care about ultimately is the consumer and making sure that they're satisfied with the answer. So somewhere you have to give us complete information so that we look like we know what we're talking about to the retail reseller, who can then look like they know what they're talking about to the consumer. So the consumer
right,
has some, and then if it changes, because shit changes,
yeah,
if it changes, tell them it changed. As soon as you know, hey, listen, I just got word today. I'm so glad you came in. I'm not going to have that. But I already had started when I told you 2 weeks ago that we thought we were going to get it in. I already started looking at alternatives. Can I give you a sample to give it a shot? And that's when you're starting to find other alternatives, That's when you comp something. That's when you give something out. That's when you try to go that
Yeah.
extra step to be that partner to the consumer, to have them count on you and rely on you and be the go-to because you're giving them up-to-date information and they're just not going, I don't know. I don't, your guess is as good as mine. It's like,
Right.
what? I'm coming to you because I don't have a guess. And I buy my stuff here. I'm looking for help. You don't have an answer for me? No. You know what you might want to do is call the manufacturer. Why don't you call the manufacturer? I buy it from you.
Right. Well, and on that point, you also mentioned one of the challenges out there is, oh, hey, this company is now going direct, and they're cutting back on what they're making available, et cetera. That again reinforces that your people are more should be more valuable in their eyes because they should not be able to move off of all of their stores or half of their stores or a third of their stores if you're hitting on that VOI part of it, because there are stores, and your store was one of those, where yes, there are some stores, if all we're doing is sitting on a shelf as a vendor, that's a waste. That's just a
Right.
waste of time. But, and that's that other part of the value that you're bringing, whether it's, the knowledge, the education, but it really does come to what I love you said there was those are your consumers too. And the best advocate and voice you have is that independent retailer talking about it because, of course, you're going to be biased. You love your product or you wouldn't be making it. There's natural skepticism out there. So having a trusted third voice saying, you know, advocating on your behalf should be the difference maker that keeps you in the stores, um, and keeps those vendors there rather than a complete shift to a direct to consumer. But I will say, I've seen both sides of that, and I have made that recommendation to a couple of vendors. As I looked at their sales, I looked at what was going on. Um, they were not in the right mix of stores, and they were just sitting on shelves. I'm like, so you have a storage warehouse in the back here, right? Which is better, having it here where you can, sell it, or having them ship it back, 180 days from now.
Well,
I
let's
mean,
let's look at when you and I first met. You were a brand
yep,
and a vendor, manufacturer. And, I got heavy into the line that you carried, did very well with it. And you were freaking out over having to tell me that you were going into another platform. And you, by the
right,
way, also sold direct. And I was like, so you got to do
yeah,
what you got to do. It's not the same thing. And to that, what was the one thing I said, which is the same thing I say to any brand that wants to go direct to the consumer. I've got no problem with that.
yeah,
Make me competitive. Make sure that I, who built your brand as a retailer, make sure that I can continue to compete with you, the brand, in my
yeah,
store because I'm going to provide a level of value that somebody on the phone when they're placing the order isn't going to be able to provide, that the website isn't going to be able to provide, that a customer service rep isn't going to be able to provide at the level that I can or my employees can or any other indie retailer out there. So make me competitive. You want to go direct? I don't have a problem with that. Don't undersell me. Make
yeah,
sure I can compete. And you were great
yeah,
about that.
yeah. Well, I was worried about it because your store had that value. You were one. There was some other stores like that. We did not. We were in a number of stores, but we did not prioritize a large group of stores. So we knew who had the knowledge base, who was a good advocate for us, and who was about as knowledgeable as our people were, which was something to say. And so those things meant that, yeah, it's a priority to keep you. If you weren't and you were just moving products as transitional
It doesn't
transaction,
matter. Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't matter. And that's the way I think consumers are as well. They're at the point now where, do I want to lug a 60-pound bag of kibble, or should I just, order it from one of these big online places that will have somebody come deliver it to my house Yeah. Why do I want to hassle with all that? Price is the same and all that, which is to your point. Allow me to compete, allow me to, make my difference at a non-cost to me. And that's where I think a lot of vendors miss
And the
that.
reward to you as a vendor, not you, but you,
Yeah.
collective you as a vendor, is I won't switch them out of your product because I
Right.
have that power to do that.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
so it's a win-win. If you can't make me competitive, then I will eliminate your brand and I will switch clients out of it.
Yeah. And I will say too, with as many bad things as social media may have bred, one thing is word travels really fast.
Hmm.
So when something gets dropped, when something gets picked up, when something changes, you're not hiding that these days. It's
Right.
going to get out there. It's going to get out there. So great discussion, Lauren. As always, really appreciate your time. All of you joining us, if you've got something you want us to touch on, please let us know. Send us an email to practicalpetchat@gmail.com. Make sure you leave comments. Anything you are feeling, social media, where you listen to the podcast, all the rest of that. Lauren reads that. I don't, but Lauren will. Um, and then she'll
He'll
tell me.
hear about it though. He'll hear
Yeah,
about it.
she will definitely tell me. Yeah, there's no doubt who drives the ship. But thank you, everybody. We really appreciate your time. We want to wish you all continued success. What you do makes a difference. Thank you for doing it.
Thanks, everybody.
The content of this podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as, nor should it be construed as, professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment for your pets. Always seek the advice of a qualified veterinarian with any questions you may have regarding your pet's health or medical condition. Never disregard professional veterinary advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The hosts and the guests of this podcast are not liable for any actions taken based on the information shared during these episodes. Any reliance on the information provided is solely at your own risk. Copyright 2025 Practical Pet Chat, all rights reserved. Unauthorized duplication, distribution, or reproduction of any content from this podcast, including but not limited to audio, scripts, and show notes, is prohibited without prior written consent. The opinions and views expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Practical Pet Chat.